My spouse and I are both employed at the same marketing firm. She serves as a customer liaison. I still can't quite grasp her job description, other than the fact that it involves being cozy with clients. I lead the IT department. Up until recently, things were going smoothly for us. We were both employed, content, and had just finished renovating our old house. We have two wonderful children, Emma, who is 13, and Daniel, who is 11. We reside near our families and have close friendships. We're both in our 30s and complement each other well. In terms of appearance, she stands at 1.75 m, has long blonde hair, stunning blue eyes, and a Scandinavian look. She's always on the move. I, too, am 1.75 m tall, with sandy hair, and prefer endurance sports, which has given me a lean physique. I was taken aback when I received an invitation to spend a long weekend at a private island owned by one of our firm's clients, Jack Edwards. Our CEO explained that he, his wife Margaret, several directors, and their partners would be attending. My spouse was also invited, as she was the main contact for the client. It seemed as though I was there to crunch numbers, but I wasn't about to complain. Jack mentioned that the client was very wealthy and could potentially become our largest client. We would be leaving early on Friday and returning on Monday via private charter, with everything provided for us. My spouse seemed to know all about it when I mentioned it on the way home. She had been working with the client for several months and was looking forward to the free weekend. When I asked her about the client, she described him as William Fellows, a mid-40s, good-looking, self-confident man who had inherited his family's fortune. She seemed somewhat fascinated by him, describing him as bossy and reserved, among other things. I thought to myself that he sounded like an arrogant man, but I decided to keep that observation to myself until the weekend. 2 weeks later, we found ourselves on a private charter plane. The island was huge, perhaps 5 miles long and a couple of miles wide, and looked like a 5-star resort. The main buildings were located behind a white sandy beach that formed a perfect crescent. My spouse was thrilled, and the others were equally excited. We were shown to our rooms and then went to lunch with our host on the veranda overlooking the bay. Our host, William, seemed like a reasonable man, and my spouse even downplayed his appearance, saying he looked like George Clooney. He thanked us for coming and told us to make ourselves at home. We spent the afternoon snorkeling, kayaking, and lounging in the bay, with free drinks and food constantly offered. The atmosphere was friendly and relaxed as we chatted in small groups. Besides the wait staff, the only other person there who wasn't introduced to us was a man who looked like a security guard and hung around in the background. I wondered what kind of enemies William had that he still needed protection, even on a deserted island. William greeted my spouse like an old friend, and they seemed very comfortable in each other's company. She and the others seemed to hang on his every word, which I suppose was natural since he was an unusually generous host and their most valuable client. As the evening wore on, a stunning brunette named Charlotte joined us. She was sweet and talked about growing up in England. I got the impression that she was from a wealthy family, but she seemed genuinely nice. I was surprised when she was quite flirty with me, even in front of my spouse. I managed to politely avoid her, chalking it up to her being overly friendly. That night, my spouse was particularly loving, and her lovemaking was intense. She confessed her love for me multiple times, and it was the best night we'd had in a long time. I had hoped for a repeat the next morning, but she quickly showered and was ready for breakfast. I finally managed to get out of bed and catch up with her while she was talking to Jack and William. I wondered if they were discussing work, as both Jack and my spouse looked slightly stressed. As I approached, the conversation broke off, and we continued to enjoy another beautiful day by the pool. That evening, we went out to dinner, and I noticed that my spouse had dressed up more than usual. She looked stunning in a red satin evening dress and stilettos. After dinner, William asked if he could speak with us for a few minutes. We agreed and followed him into the office, with a security guard trailing behind. William sat down in a high-backed leather chair, and I sat on the sofa opposite, noticing that my spouse sat slightly away from me. After a long pause, William spoke. "I have a proposition for you, Mark. It's personal. Would you be willing to hear me out?" I tried to appear calm, despite being completely stunned. William continued, "I've had the pleasure of working with your wife over the past few months, and we've built a great relationship. I would like to spend the rest of the weekend with her, and I'm willing to compensate you for her time. I intend to transfer $100,000 into your joint account." I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but no one else did. William continued, "As in any other business, I'm willing to negotiate the price to get what I want. Besides, Charlotte will be in a difficult situation, and I would be glad if you would agree to entertain her." I turned to my spouse, expecting her to smile, but she just looked worried. "This is not a joke, Mark. William invited me to join him, and I think we should seriously consider this offer." I wanted to hit him, but when I looked back, the guard was already close. I was surprised at how quickly he had moved. William continued, "I assure you that your wife fully supports this idea. We'll all have a great time, and you'll make a significant amount of money." I turned to my spouse, feeling devastated. "Is this true? Did you plan this?" She flinched at my question but didn't say anything. I desperately tried to think, but my breathing was becoming increasingly labored. I looked at the guard, who seemed focused on my every move. I thought about attacking William, but I knew the guard could easily overpower me. "What's your name?" I asked the guard. "Shane, sir," he replied. "And I cannot comment on the matter. If I attacked your boss, I think I could kill him with my bare hands or something." Shane smiled, perhaps to keep me from doing anything rash. Turning to William, I said, "It's a good thing you brought him. Otherwise, I would have beaten the crap out of you." William didn't seem bothered at all. "Let us not rush, Mark. A lot depends on this." My spouse spoke next. "Mark, think about it. Just a couple of days, and the money will change our lives forever." I was devastated. She had clearly planned this and wanted it to happen. "Tell me, dear, did the offer of money come after you decided to do this?" I asked. She didn't answer. I think Charlotte was also offered to sweeten the deal. "Is she a prostitute?" William replied, "Charlotte is my personal friend, and in addition to being rich, she is a very high-class escort who only takes contracts that interest her. Rest assured, with her, you will experience something out of the ordinary." I turned to William. "Well, you can put your money up your perfumed ass." It was at that moment that my spouse spoke up and showed her true colors. "This is my body, and I want to do this. It's just sex, and we'll both be interested in exploring it with others. William and I like each other, but that's it. It doesn't change our love for each other. I'm sure you and Charlotte will have a good time too." I was stunned by her words. "The difference, my dear wife, is that I don't want anyone else. This is much more than you imagine. This is betrayal and conspiracy behind my back. I will never be able to trust you again. And if you're willing to do it once, then why not do it again?" She quickly replied, "You're overreacting. I told you about this, so it's not a conspiracy or a secret. I'm being absolutely truthful. This will happen, and then I will return, becoming completely yours again. If you love me, you will only allow me this one thing. Think about what we can do with the money, holidays with the kids, everything. Don't you dare use our children as an excuse. We don't need the money, and I don't think you'll take me back. Your honesty will only work if we agree on something together, and the only person you agree on anything with is this pompous man. Money is just an excuse. You want and plan to do it. I think the money and Charlotte are just because you didn't think I'd agree." She continued, "You're right. I want to do this. I want to experience something different, something new. I'm attracted to William, but this shouldn't hurt us. I don't want to change, and you think this is better. Have you already made your choice? Are you dressed up for it? Don't resist, baby. You won't like the consequences. I asked, what do you mean? She replied, you won't come out of this with good consequences if you fight this or go for a divorce. You will lose everything, your home, children, even your job will be in jeopardy. There's no need for this. Just accept it. Everything will be much easier. See you tomorrow, and remember, I love you and only you. I needed to leave. Breathing was becoming a real problem, and if I stayed, I would lose control. I stood up, feeling unsteady, and staggered towards the door. I heard my spouse calling my name, but I kept walking. As I crossed the hall, Charlotte came up to me and hugged me, saying that everything would be fine. I turned to her and asked, who are you, a consolation prize? She walked away with her head held high. I kept walking and eventually made it outside. I heard footsteps behind me and was disappointed to see that it was Shane, the security guard, and not my spouse. Listen, Shane, you just need to back off, I said. I would love to, but I need to make sure you don't do anything stupid, he replied. For example, do you have any ideas, because I don't have any. Shane suggested that I sit against the wall, pull my knees up, and focus on taking long, slow breaths. After a few minutes, I calmed down. Thank you, I said. I probably had an anxiety or panic attack. Shane replied, you were quite pale, but now you look more pink. Speaking of stupid ideas, is there a way to get off this island? I asked, seriously, you can't get off this island today. There are no boats, the plane and pilot left for another charter, and you might be able to radio for help, but a cheating wife is hardly an emergency. Shane continued, I'm glad you think she's unfaithful. She doesn't seem to understand that, and I'm already starting to doubt myself. What should I do? I can't even beat the crap out of him. Shane suggested that there was a ship coming early Monday morning with cargo, and I could take it if I wanted to avoid the plane with everyone else going home. He said that no one, including him, wanted to be accused of kidnapping or imprisonment. He even offered to go with me, saying that the contract was losing its attractiveness and that he didn't like being on the wrong side, even if it paid well. The next morning, I changed into my gym clothes and hurried down the stairs, hoping to avoid everyone and go on my date with Shane. Unfortunately, as soon as I entered the dining room, silence fell. I looked for something quick to eat and grabbed some fruit. The noise of conversations resumed, and I heard comments about everything being fine and that she would come back. John Cousins, the CFO, came up to me with his wife. Look, we've all been through this. Just let it happen. It's nothing personal. He dates other wives, but then he moves on, and he is very generous. At that moment, my spouse and William appeared. She looked absolutely pleased with herself, but her smile faded when she noticed me. She let go of William's hand and came over to kiss or hug me, but I pulled away and looked around. God, I thought, what a damn idiot. Everyone knew what would happen before the weekend even started. What an absolute fool I was. I went outside, and my spouse spoke. Please stay, Mark. We can chat with the group and have another good day together. I looked around, and all eyes were fixed on me. Some people seemed anticipatory, while others were clearly amused by the scene. No, I said. He paid for you, and he can keep you. But before I go, I need to tell the group something. I believe this weekend has been planned for quite some time, and you all have known about it. So it's only fair that you all hear what I have to say. All members of the group looked at each other in shock, nervously glancing at one another. Jack and Margaret, I would never have come this weekend if you weren't here. I never thought you would be involved in something so vile. You know and approve of what he does, like some kind of fan club of sick voyeurs. I hope you enjoyed keeping me blind. I noticed how you all began to move awkwardly. This was clearly not part of your plans. I actually thought we were friends, and making me feel at home so you could arrange everything was a nice touch. And you're wrong, Bill. This is very personal. So thank you for your role and for destroying my marriage. The fact that you are willing to use leverage over my children is frankly disgusting. I don't allow anyone to threaten my children. My spouse insisted, you're making too big a deal out of this. It was merely a momentary lapse, a fleeting encounter that shouldn't shake our foundation. I've already expressed my love. I interjected, here comes the initial line of defense, trying to downplay it. Are we? I'm well aware you had a game plan for how I'd react. Being the captain and all, let's dissect what you had in mind. Phase A, we stay put, and you gradually normalize the situation before we return home. You and your cohorts probably even discussed this seriously, preemptively addressing the issue on your behalf. No doubt you expect me to swallow my pride, refrain from overreacting, and maturely accept the situation. After all, it's just my ego and pride, right? You know it's a futile effort, but hey, it's all part of the easing in process. So, for Phase B, once the weekend wraps up, you relinquish control to me. We'll engage in intimacy, lots of it, perhaps even exploring new territories. Leveraging your connections will rejuvenate our bond, and we'll emerge stronger than ever. I wouldn't be surprised if you've plotted ways to seduce me. After all, sweetheart, you can't let my sense of loss linger too long. She glanced nervously at William, indicating that my remark had struck a chord. Additionally, we'll have access to the funds he promised you. With the earnings from your side endeavors, we can treat the kids to a Disneyland trip and meet Mickey. These words elicited visible reactions from several individuals, evident from their shudders. If we're still fighting, Phase C kicks in. You already sowed the seed last night. If I really love you, then I should allow you to do this for one night. This may begin to weaken my resolve, but what do I get after 15 years of devotion to you if I'm treated like crap? You knew I would never agree, and you attack me with a complete lack of respect. So, this plan won't work. Now you're a little worried. Maybe you better give me time to cool down. In a week or two, you'll find me drowning my sorrows in a bar somewhere, and then you'll ask for forgiveness. This is Phase D. You actually regret all this. You didn't realize it would hurt me so much, and you never would have done it if you had known. You love me. You beg, cry, and all that. I must admit that you have a chance. But then, the way you just walked hand in hand with him in front of everyone and looked so delighted with yourself, this confirmed to me that there really was no guilt or regret, only contempt and a desire to humiliate me. Phase D won't work for you. So, finally, a backup plan may be needed. Phase E, threats. You will take all the money, the house, and set the children on me. You've already suggested that I might lose my job. William will pay to find you the best lawyers. I will end my life sad, poor, and lonely. You can even threaten to move in with him and live happily ever after with our children. William raised his head so quickly that I almost laughed. Oh God, it looks like your lover doesn't really want your children, baby. She finally found her voice. It's really not that big of a problem. Why don't we just relax and give ourselves time to think? I said categorically, we've already been through this, Lucy. So why don't we save everyone time and move on to the final result? This is what I was thinking about last night, and my conclusion is that everyone, including the children, would be better off if we divorced. This is much healthier than living in an unhappy home. At the end of the day, you can't be happy if you're doing this crap, and I'm certainly not happy. You can try to stop me from seeing my kids, but you know I'm a good father, and that's good for them. They're old enough to understand. I doubt your family and friends will support you, not after they find out what you did. I don't care about the money. It's always been you. Everyone sat in shocked silence. I turned to Jack. And one more thing, Jack. You can shove your job up your ass. But I'll see you when I file a wrongful dismissal case. My job depends on the client having my wife. It seems that this is simply the reason." With that, I walked out. You could have heard a pin drop. Shane followed me as always, and as we left, he chuckled. "Well done. I see that you took to heart the advice to keep the plan to yourself." I couldn't help but smile. "Yes, it looks like I failed at this idea." Shane actually laughed as we left the building. "It's good that you remained a civilian. You would never have achieved success in the army anyway. Let's go." Shane grabbed his backpack and set off at a leisurely pace up the coast. After a mile, I was having trouble keeping up with him, and I began to think that perhaps it was a mistake. I heard him shout something from up front about how physical torture is a great way to take your mind off mental torment. My burning muscles and lungs seemed to agree. The scenery was breathtaking, and Shane was good company. He switched from asking about me to telling hilarious stories from his time in the British Army. We spent several hours circling the northern part of the island, climbing along the coast, and heading to a high point in the center. I was barely out of breath when Shane suggested we jog back since it was all downhill. I could barely keep up with him, but I suspected he was slowing down to either support me or torment me, depending on your point of view. We returned at noon, and I was panting and exhausted. I told Shane that until today, I thought I was in shape. He was hardly out of breath but was kind enough to say that I was pretty fit and that it wouldn't make me feel too bad since he was a physical education instructor in the army. I staggered to my room, and my spouse was not there. I wondered if my wife was earning an extra fee. I showered and, finding myself very hungry, headed to the dining room to find some food. But I was again disappointed to find William and my spouse there. Shane was also there, hanging out in the background, and I wondered how he managed it. He looked fresh as a daisy and fully dressed in a suit. William began to speak with his usual airy confidence. "Mark, my dear friend, I feel that we started on the wrong foot, and I want to apologize. I've never had problems like this with my relationships before, and I certainly don't want to jeopardize your marriage." I replied, "It's too late. You've already done it." He continued, "I want to withdraw my request to spend this evening with your wife and increase the compensation." With these words, William handed me a piece of paper. I opened it and saw a check for $250,000. I stared at my spouse, who looked like she was crying, and I couldn't help myself. "You must have been pretty good to earn that much, baby." Her eyes flashed with anger. "That's not the point. We made a terrible mistake, and we're trying to correct it." William was the perfect gentleman and was genuinely concerned about how you reacted. I laughed at this statement. "What is your idea of an ideal gentleman? Did he say thank you after he finished having sex with you?" "There's no need to joke, Mark. This is just a miscalculation on our part. We miscalculated your reaction to what was happening. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience for both of us. You should be grateful to your wife for making the sacrifice to offer you and your children a better life." I doubted it. I made it clear what I thought about your plan, but you both went ahead anyway. You could have stopped everything at any moment but decided to stop only after you had your share of pleasure. With that, I tore up the check. "I just saved you from becoming a honey. There's only the cheating part left, but I don't think I can fix that this time." Her tears started immediately. I turned to William. "Why are you doing this? Control or the thrill of having someone else's wife? Either way, it makes you a very sad bastard. How old are you? 48 years old, and you act like a child stealing toys just because you can. Don't you have anything more meaningful to focus on?" William laughed in response. "I run an international corporation and give millions to charity. I have something to focus on." I replied, "According to the research I did last night, you inherited this corporation, and under your management, it is shrinking. When it comes to charities, attending galas, dinners, and fundraisers must be difficult. When was the last time you did something yourself, got your hands dirty, and actually helped another person? I doubt you have it in you. You're so self-absorbed and too busy playing games with people's lives. Judging by the way you planned this weekend for everyone to know, you must be turned on by humiliating others. Sorry, Lucy, but it wasn't just because he wanted you. He wants every board member's wife, so you're one of many. Why don't you, William, try to grow up, have a real relationship with someone, put some of your wealth to good use, and stop being a complete asshole? For the first time, I saw him stumble over his words and look unsure of himself. Shane, you better get that piece of crap out of my sight before I take a chance on you. I saw Shane hide a small smile before saying to William, I think it's time for us to leave, sir, before your safety becomes an issue. After they left, I grabbed a snack and went down to the beach, trying to avoid the others. Just when I thought I was alone on the beach, I noticed Charlotte lying in a hammock, reading. If she had been beautiful before, now when she smiled, she became truly dazzling. I approached her. I'm sorry about last night. Before I could continue, she replied, there's no need for this. I was sure that you would accept the offer. If I had known, I would never have approached you. Your reaction is completely understandable, and your speech at breakfast was absolutely wonderful. I couldn't agree more. When you left, Lucy burst into tears, and I've never seen William look so embarrassed. I loved every minute of it. I answered, thank you. Good. I'm even glad that something is starting to become clearer. I'm already tired of being told that this is nonsense. You see, William has no idea what to do with you. He had never been rejected before and was not used to dealing with morals. He already offered you more money, didn't he? She replied, yes, just before I came down. $250,000. Damn idiot. I told him not to do it, but he's used to paying enough until he gets what he wants. He will pay for this, both in business and personally. Charlotte was easy to talk to, and she listened intently as I talked about my marriage and children. She was clearly intelligent and highly educated. She expressed surprise that my spouse would do this while in a seemingly happy marriage, suggesting that there had been some kind of unhappiness or open marriage arrangement between us. I thought about it. No, it's just an unexpected ambush. She seems to be completely fascinated by this guy. He can have that effect on a woman. It's all very charming, but the river isn't that deep, if you know what I mean. We talked some more, and I felt a little better. I think you really love her. Your reaction to the proposals and at breakfast must be breaking your heart, she said. I shrugged. I'm sorry that I took part in this. It's not your fault. I just need to survive one more night, and then maybe I can escape. She smiled again, and it was starting to distract me. Well, maybe I can help with this. Everyone was surprised when I came to dinner. My spouse no longer sat next to William. Dinner was quite normal, although I ignored my spouse's attempts at small talk. When she asked if I wanted to go to bed early, I smiled pleasantly and said, I have other plans. She looked embarrassed, and this embarrassment increased when Charlotte came around the table and hugged me as I stood up. We left the hall together and walked down to the cabins on the beach. The original plan was to just leave together and give my spouse a taste of her own medicine, but Charlotte felt good in my arms, very good. And when we kissed, at least some of the disappointment of the last 24 hours disappeared. I thought about keeping my morals, my sense of right and wrong, but then I looked at her. I guess my spouse wanted me to be more flexible, and as far as I'm concerned, our marriage vows have already been broken by her. I had an outstanding night with Charlotte. It wasn't just her beauty, she had a serene sexiness. Every move seemed so precise and perfectly timed. She truly was a master of her craft. Surprisingly, I didn't think about my spouse and didn't feel guilty. The painful memory of my spouse with William easily eliminated any hint of remorse. I had a good time on the boat taxi to the airport and then the usual flight home. I picked up the kids and made arrangements for their weekend as best I could. I made up a vague story about how their mother and I had had a fight but that we would work things out. I was just suggesting dinner when my spouse came into the house, dragging in our heavy suitcase. The children ran upstairs to get ready, shouting, "Hi, Mom." She smiled. "Dinner is a good idea. If you give me a few minutes, I'll get ready." I replied, "I'd rather you didn't do that, Lucy. Like you said, I don't know how much time I'll have with them, so I'd rather we go alone." She looked surprised. "Lucy, when I met William, I immediately felt a connection. He seemed so dashing, confident, strong, charming, almost like old movie characters. It was strange that later, in your presence, he was neither of them. Flirting led to lunch and then dinner. It was exciting. I felt dizzy from it. After dinner, he kissed me goodnight, and I almost melted. But I was determined not to cheat, and I told him about it. William talked about how some of his relationships were open, and I wondered if you might be able to go for it. When he offered to make this offer, I thought that the money would justify it. Jack supported me, and we started making plans for the weekend. The weekend started brilliantly. I had a great time with you and almost gave up on the whole thing. If only I could. William said that everything would be fine and that you should relax. Both he and Jack said to expect you to reject the idea but to give you time to calm down. You reacted completely differently than we expected and planned. The biggest shock was that you actually looked unwell. I wanted to run after you, but William assured me that everything would be fine. He asked Charlotte to meet you, so when you didn't return, I thought you were staying with her. I was relieved, and after months of waiting, I was desperate to spend time with William. As soon as he kissed me, I realized that I would succeed. He led me into his bedroom, and before I could take off my clothes, I was already excited with anticipation. William stood in front of me and undressed me as if I were the most delicate trophy. I felt so special. Despite his age, he was incredibly fit. I was not disappointed by his body or his manhood below the waist. When I reached out to him, William pulled away and started kissing my whole body, kissing me everywhere, slowly. He gauged my reaction and responded seemingly in sync with everything I wanted and needed. My first climax came quickly, caused by his skillful caresses. When I came to my senses, he stood up and began to kiss me passionately. He was a skilled lover. I was stunned by the sensations that washed over my body. Now I was completely captured by desire. He increased the pace and began to take me hard as the next climax approached. William followed me, and finally, we both relaxed in each other's arms. I woke up in the middle of the night, confused, believing I was sleeping with you, Mark. In shock, I found another man lying next to me. I felt guilty, wondering where you were and how you were feeling. I must have disturbed William because he woke up and kissed me, and my guilt was soon forgotten when he climbed on top of me again. This morning, I was brushing my teeth when William came up behind me. He seemed insatiable. We moved back onto the bed, holding each other's hands, before I pushed him onto his back and straddled him, delighted by the look of desire and ecstasy on his face. Once again, I was able to coincide with our final climax. It was everything I had hoped for, and I was thrilled. I kissed William and thanked him for a wonderful night. It felt natural to hold his hand as we walked down the stairs and into the dining room, and I looked forward to another night. I turned to look at you, Mark, and everything fell apart. I had to swallow my panic when you exploded. Everything had to go wrong. It was clear that you had not slept with Charlotte, even without this. I thought that you would leave, but I did not expect such anger. What scared me most was your cold rage. You were too logical in everything. You anticipated almost all of my well-developed arguments. When I brought them, supported by William, they sounded much more convincing. But you crushed them all in 5 minutes, making them sound weak and pathetic, even to me. I tried my best to hold my position, but I realized that I was losing. After you left, I collapsed, sobbing hysterically. William looked unsure for the first time. When I came to my senses, I tried to find him, but I couldn't. Jack and William then proposed the idea of stopping everything by offering more money. When we offered you more money later that day, I was amazed at how things turned out. William's presence had diminished so much that he truly seemed small and insignificant. Before that, his authority was such that I believed everything he said. But now, this authority was undermined to the limit. He assured me that we could have fun without ruining my marriage. This plan crumbled into dust, and I was no longer sure of anything. I then flew into an irrational rage, assuming that I would stay on the island longer and have fun. But I was surprised by Jack's calm but cruel response. "Don't be so damn stupid, Lucy. If you want to have even the slightest chance of saving your marriage, ask for forgiveness. You better be honest and serious in what you say. He doesn't seem like a man who's willing to change his mind." Personally, I can't argue with anything he said at breakfast. I was even more shocked when Jack told William that they would never have the same things again. He continued by saying that you were a decent guy and didn't deserve any of the crap we caused. William should take his advice and think about growing up. I was amazed that you were present at the evening dinner. I tried to talk to you, but you simply ignored me. When you left with Charlotte, I was devastated. I was going to run after you, but what could I say? Because I basically told you to do it, and I spent most of the trip justifying meaningless sex. I felt angry and betrayed. And then I remembered that I had done this and more with you, Mark. But what made it worse was that it was all pre-planned and so public. I think I deserve it. At least it might help us stay together if we both cheat. The plane ride back without you, Mark, made me realize how much trouble my marriage was in. Because you had managed to find a way to leave the island before us. I never really talked to you properly after that incident. The realization of my actions began to become apparent, and waves of guilt washed over me. I reminded myself about the money. Who in their right mind would refuse such an amount? My constant tears turned into full-blown sobs bordering on hysteria, which I could not control. Jack and Margaret became increasingly concerned about my well-being. When I got home, you were there, but you didn't want me to have dinner with you and the kids. I almost managed to hold out until they left, and then I burst into tears again. Exclusion from the meal seemed to me an ominous prelude to my future life. When I came to my senses, I desperately tried to think of what to say when you returned. The problem was that everything sounded like what you had already said, and I was embarrassed to ask my mother or friends for advice. When we finally got home, the kids went straight to their bedrooms as usual, burying their heads in video games and phones. I stood and looked at you in the kitchen. You seemed completely unfamiliar to me. You almost whispered, "Can we talk? I mean, properly." I shrugged, thinking that we should figure this out eventually, so why drag it out? "I'm sorry, Mark. I promise you that it was just one time, and I will be yours and as faithful as before the weekend. I did it for the money. It could be life-changing for us as a family. I did it for us." You replied, "You did it for yourself. We were fine, and money wasn't a problem." You couldn't wait to jump into his bed. You must have been in for a fancy dinner and sex. Overall, everyone had a good time. You were overreacting. It shouldn't mean anything. I said, "You really should skip phase A, Lucy. And you know it. This wasn't casual sex. It was a planned betrayal, arrogant, selfish. All those traits that I hate, and now I hate you very much. So, you did the same thing to that." "No, I didn't. I took revenge because nothing seems to reach you. You couldn't pull your head out of your ass to see how it affected me. I would never have thought about this if I had a faithful wife. And I hope it hurts, really hurts, so you might have some idea of what I feel." You replied, "Only I didn't plan this in advance and with the knowledge of everyone else, making myself look like a complete idiot." Speaking of which, how long did your secret plan take, and was this your first time with him? My eyes widened at this, but then I seemed to realize that this was a sincere and reasonable question. It was the first time we had dinner, and I knew that he liked me. I think Jack and Margaret were feeling me out, asking if I was interested. The four of us were having dinner, and for the first time in my marriage, I found myself aroused by another man. His confidence was intoxicating. I knew it was wrong, and I resisted with all my might. I managed not to have an affair then. William suggested the idea of asking you about opening up our relationship and what you thought about changing. We talked about this briefly one evening, but it was clear that you would not agree to this. Then he came up with the idea for this proposal, and I thought that the money would make it all worth it for you. We were nervous as the trip got closer, and he suggested inviting Charlotte to ensure that you would agree. I didn't like the idea, but by then, I just wanted it to happen. I thought that even if you didn't entirely approve of this, we would recover. Then you so effectively destroyed all these ideas at breakfast, and I began to realize the consequences of what I had done. You replied, "Was it worth it?" I replied, "No, of course not." I was so carried away by him and listened to what he said. "I never meant to hurt you." You said, "Oh," then straight to phase D, unintentional pain. You were enjoying this. It was clear enough from the way you were flying around during breakfast. Now you're just telling me what I need to hear. I replied, "Sorry, the honest answer is yes. I liked it. He was good in a different way. It's not bigger or better. It's just different. It was exciting, new, exciting, and I was fascinated by it. He is very experienced and knows what he is doing. But this was the only time. Please don't abandon us and break up our family because of a one-time incident." You smiled ruefully. "It's funny, but that's exactly how I would describe what you've already done, destroyed our family because of a one-time act. It's all on you, not me. You're right. It's all my fault. I'm so sorry. I love you with all my heart." I replied, "Well, not with all your heart. You gave part of it to him. And even if you claim that you didn't, your love still wasn't enough to keep me faithful. How can I trust you again?" I was so trusting because it never occurred to me that you were capable of what you did. I think I don't really know you. I can hardly bring myself to look at you, let alone pretend this didn't happen. You recoiled in shock. You can't say that. You love me. I know I never thought that I could lose you. I replied, "I agree. You only thought about yourself and your ass, not about me and the children. But sometimes, love is not enough." I tried to calm down and move away from gaining points in the argument and anger. After a long pause, I continued, "Listen, Lucy, even if we stay together and just forget about it, as you suggest, we will never be the same. You destroyed the trust and bond of care we had for each other. You remember that more than anything in the world, we cared about each other and the children. We didn't let anyone else get hurt. I never expected that you could hurt me." You replied, "Mark, I love you. I made a huge mistake, and I'm ready to do anything to get it back. This cannot mean that we will get divorced to get your way. You tore my heart and threatened me. You don't do that to someone you really love." I stared in silence, stunned, not knowing what else to say. "We need to talk about the children. I think that children are better off in separated families than in dysfunctional ones. So, from this point of view, the best option is divorce. I agree that you will win custody, but don't try to stop me from seeing them. It will be better for you too. They are listening to me. You are not very good at setting boundaries." I frown at the irony of that comment. "And they are already testing you. It will be better for you and for them if I remain in their lives." You shrugged. "Seriously, Lucy, no matter what happens, don't stop me from seeing our children. Don't alienate me. I am not a bad guy. I treat them well and love them to bits. You haven't seen how angry I am yet. I will fight you to the end, spend all our money on lawyers, and we will destroy each other in the process. I warned you, and you nodded. I would never do that. You are a great father, and they need you. They will want you to continue to take them with you on trips and practice with them in all sports sections. I turned and looked at you, surprised by the first comment in which I felt that you were not trying to manipulate me or justify your actions. Be careful, Lucy. You're throwing off phase D, seriously, even though you know who I am, why do this? I can only think that deep down, you wanted us to break up. You replied urgently, God, never, Lucy. There is no excuse for this. I became selfish, convinced myself that I could get something more. It seemed to me that somehow I could hold you. Why didn't you stop me that evening and just leave? I couldn't breathe and had to leave. Then it didn't seem to matter much anymore. The fact that you wanted another guy by any means necessary meant that I had already lost you. This conversation killed us long before you reached his bed. Perhaps it was all over when you first started planning everything. You spent weeks talking to him and preparing. Letting you go and not forcing you to stop makes it easier to end everything. There is no turning back, and that was the beginning of the end. The marriage was destroyed in less than 4 days. We divorced, fortunately without any need for counseling. I think you didn't want to explain your actions. On the one hand, it's a shame. I was hoping someone qualified could show how wrong you were. You did keep one promise, and in the end, we spent approximately equal amounts of time with the children. You even admitted to them that everything was your fault without going into details. They were old enough to understand and often decided for themselves where to stay. They were at that age when parents became famous taxi drivers and loan sharks. I'm biased, but I think they are great kids and handled the breakup very well. Children can be surprisingly resilient. Under the terms of the divorce, you could keep our house until the children were of age and then sell or buy it. But I still wanted this for the children, and it allowed them to attend the same school. Fortunately, the right decision paid off. By the time the children went to college, real estate prices had skyrocketed. You had to buy the share from me, and it was the best investment of my life. How could you afford this? Well, we kept $250,000 and divided it up in the divorce. And just like with Charlotte, I couldn't hold myself to the moral high ground. What can I say? I am a practical person. Either way, it seemed like a small price to pay compared to the cost of the marriage and what was once a happy life. I quit my job, was given a payout to avoid the embarrassment of an employment tribunal, and started my own web design business. You kept trying to get us back together, but I just wasn't interested. So, was it the right decision to end the relationship? It was messy, and there were certainly no winners. But the initial threats and consequences did not materialize. I wasn't going to forget or forgive that night, and there's something important about looking at yourself in the mirror and liking whoever you see there.